Want to talk a little bit about a famous Supreme Court decision, Dred Scott versus Sandford. This is going to tie in with our discrimination topic, and it also has the distinction of, for a lot of people, being the worst Supreme Court decision ever made. So you can judge that for yourself as we go through. But it is Dred Scott versus Sandford. Dred Scott was a slave. He belonged to a doctor in Missouri, and in this doctor though was a military doctor, and so he moved to different places in the United States, and so even though he was in Missouri, he'll move his family, including Dred Scott, to Illinois and Wisconsin at different times. So when they're in Illinois and Wisconsin and try to come back to Missouri, Dred Scott sues his master for his freedom. Basically says, hey, you took me to a free state. Slavery is illegal in Illinois, and so that is tantamount to you freeing me. And so he sues, actually wins in local court in Missouri, but loses when his case goes to the Missouri Supreme Court. And so the appeal process is going to take the Dred Scott case up to the United States Supreme Court. The court at this time is under the control of a Chief Justice by the name of Taney. Chief Justice Taney is an interesting figure in the history of the Supreme Court. He was the fifth Chief Justice, and by a lot of accounts, he did a lot of nice things, a lot of good things as a justice of the Supreme Court. But his handling of this case, and then him kind of actively fighting against what Lincoln was trying to do during the Civil War, gives him a pretty bad reputation in history in the years that follow. Now you'll notice that this court case, he moves. They try to move him back to Missouri in 1846. This court case doesn't get to the Supreme Court until 1857. So you're over a decade later, this decision is going to come out, and it gives you just an idea of how slow that process can actually go. They're going to hear the case of Dred Scott, and Taney is going to take it upon himself. He was from the state of Maryland. His family had been slave owners, and he thought in 1857 he was going to end this question of slavery. He was frustrated with some of the compromises that kept being made, and so he just kind of felt like, with this decision, we're going to put this to bed. One of the things that is going to happen with this decision is he's basically going to declare the Missouri Compromise, which had been kind of the way things were operating in the United States since 1820, illegal. Basically, the Missouri Compromise, when Maine wanted to become a state, they were always worried about the balance between free and slave states. And so Maine wants to become a state, so they agree to admit Maine as a free state and Missouri as a slave state, and then they establish a line and basically say anything below this line can be a slave state, anything above can be a free state. And so that had been kind of the law. Taney comes in and just, in this decision, just kind of blasts everything and says that there's nothing in the Constitution that says that the government has the power to say who could be a slave or a free state. The decision goes against Dred Scott by a vote of 7-2, but not for the reason you think. And that's where this gets interesting. When you look at it, I've got a little bit of the decision for you here. Basically what it said was black people are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and can therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to citizens of the United States. So the Supreme Court doesn't even take up the issue of what happens if a slave moves from a slave state to a free state. The Supreme Court says we're not even going to hear this case because Dred Scott isn't a citizen of the United States. Dred Scott doesn't have any standing in this court because he's not a citizen. And so if slaves are property, they're property. They're not going to be, they don't have the rights that true citizens of the United States have. So this isn't just, hey, Dred Scott, you're not free because of this. This is a blow to everybody who is trying to abolish slavery. And you've got the Supreme Court saying these aren't citizens. These aren't people in the constitutional sense of the word. And so a pretty devastating blow to that cause. Taney also writes in his opinion, he says, a perpetual and impassable barrier was intended to be erected between the white race and the one which they had reduced to slavery. And so basically he looks and says, from the time slavery got started, laws had been passed basically illustrating the idea that states don't consider these slaves to be people, and that was how he justified the decision that he was making. Now it's 1857. If you know your history, we're right on the precipice of the Civil War, which will get started in 1861. And so this decision doesn't hang around very long. It's actually nullified in 1865 with the adoption of the 13th Amendment, which says slavery is outlawed everywhere in the United States. And then in 1868 with the 14th Amendment, which extended the rights of citizenship to anybody who had been born in the United States. And that's really, remember we talked about the checks and balances thing early on. That's really the way that you can check the power of the Supreme Court. You have to amend the Constitution. And so that's what they went in and did. And of course, you know that already because you were reading the Constitution last night before you went to bed. But like I said, a lot of people consider this to be the worst Supreme Court decision that has ever been made. It was a nasty justification of slavery and the condition those folks were in. Fortunately, the ruling doesn't have a very long shelf life. Once the Civil War's over with, things change, so the Dred Scott decision goes away. I've got a couple of cool videos I'm going to drop on the playlist about Dred Scott, give you a little bit more of the legal background. So I encourage you to head over there, check those out.